Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising, but it's also shocking. And I know that sounds incongruous. When I say it's not surprising that Belichick would continue, reportedly the stance of Brady's 1 of 53. But when you step away from it, it's shocking that Belichick never wavered on that stance that Brady's 1 of 53. Because another thing that's reported in this book is that in that phone call, Bill Belichick told Tom Brady he's the greatest player the league has ever seen. So one would have thought Bill Belichick might have taken a lesson from one of his football mentors, which is when a player, Bill Parcells, that is, when a player such as that comes into your football life, you treat them differently. Bill Parcells had that with Lawrence Taylor. Bill Parcells was as much of a hard son of a gun as Bill Belichick is, and yet had different rules for Lawrence Taylor because Lawrence Taylor was so great and so transcendent, it made sense. And by the way, it didn't cause some rift in the locker room because all the other players knew, well, I'm not Lawrence Taylor, so he has special rules. Belichick would never bend like that for Tom, up to and including the very end. And because of that, it's not surprising that he only did a phone call or a FaceTime or a text rather than sitting and talking with him. But Broussard, I think that is ultimately why right now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have one of the best quarterback tight end combos in all of football in Brady to Gronk. And the Patriots are out there trying to piece it together with Mac Jones, Jonnu Smith, and Hunter Henry because Belichick had the greatest player ever and one of the greatest tight ends ever and treated them just like QB1 and TE1 on the roster. And that eventually wore thin for these guys.
Right. Well, let me first address Belichick's denial, right? He said it's not true. I don't think he was denying that he didn't meet with Brady face to face. I think he was denying the motivation, at least as alleged in the book. The book said he didn't want to meet with Brady face to face, implying that it was out of some disdain or lack of respect for Tom Brady. I think that is what Belichick was denying, that I did not meet with Tom because I don't like him or I was ticked off or whatever it may be. The schedules just were conflicting and we couldn't get together. I think that's what Belichick means. Now, look, Belichick didn't break any rules or laws by not sitting down with Tom Brady face to face. And I can, knowing Belichick and the way he's operated these 20 years, you can see that I can see how he would be like, look, you're gone. Let me move on and find who my replacement will be for Tom Brady. Down the line, when you're retired, maybe we'll meet and hug and yuck it up about the old times. But right now, I got business to take care of in replacing you. So he's fully within his rights to do that. But after 20 years together, after doing what no other coach and quarterback combination, heck, no other franchise has ever done, you would think he would sit down with Brady. That's the right thing to do. All right. It's just ill-mannered not to do it. It's like if you are about to tell your spouse you want to divorce them and you call them on the phone and tell them rather than meeting them in person and telling them face to face. Is it wrong to do it over the phone? Not necessarily, but it's just a bit rude. You think you owe them more than that. And that's how I look at this. Now, ultimately, I think this episode just illustrates the differences in Belichick and Brady. The book by Seth Wickersham also says, Nick, that the Patriots did a study of the great winners of our generation, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Tom Brady. And they found out that Brady was unlike the other three in that he was at his best not when he had a chip on his shoulder, but when he was in a loving and supportive environment. So clearly Brady is about relationships, emotions, friendships, things like that. Belichick's the opposite. Belichick does not get emotionally attached to his players. So I think the differences in these two guys, Wiles, is illustrated in the way they parted ways over the phone rather than in person.
Yeah, well, I think you made a lot of interesting points there, Broussard. First of all, the book is coming out in October, which I'm going to buy. I would also buy that study that Belichick commissioned about great athletes. Fascinated by it. Belichick's like, I want to learn more about these guys. The one thing that I know that you referenced, like Brady thrives in a loving environment. That seemed at odds with the fact that he always talks about being 199 and the Brady six, I think, the 6 quarterbacks taken, and he tears up. Like, he does have a huge chip on his shoulder, this manufactured rage I think they were talking about Tiger and Jordan having. So I don't know. I'm interested in that study if it ever gets released. Maybe Seth can put it out as an audiobook. And about Belichick's denials. Seth Wickersham, this is actually like the second huge thing he wrote about the Patriots. This is the book. But in 2018, he dropped this bombshell of an article for ESPN, the magazine, and he was largely raked over the coals for this. The Belichick said it wasn't true. A lot of people in New England media said it wasn't true. And guess what? It was all true. Everything that is in that article was true. That Brady had issues with Belichick's bracing style, that Jimmy Garoppolo's, being in the building was an issue, so Belichick had to ship him out, and then TB12, all the TB12 stuff, Belichick wasn't down with it, and how Tom Brady was kind of forcing that into the locker room, and guys were going out TB12. That was all true. So the idea that any of these things are going to be sort of, I don't know, counterbalance, I don't know, it's second and third hand reports. Like, Belichick, I love you. The reasons why it's second and third hand reports is because Seth probably asked you, would you like to do an interview? And you said no. So if you say no to an interview request, you can't go and do a press conference and be like, second, third, like, all right, well, answer your phone. But the question I have for you, I'm going to send it to Broussard, because you sort of talked about other athletes. This is the central question that I think I am trying to unwrap on the last 20 years, and what I'm looking forward to trying to figure out in this book. Is emotional ruthlessness a necessary partner with greatness? Whether you're emotionally ruthless to yourself, like Tiger Woods kind of living a life that sort of demanded greatness, or so he thought, or Jordan's ultimate competitiveness, where he's going to bet on everything from golf games to quarters against the wall, that you have to always be on that edge. And is that unsustainable over the course of 20 years? That eventually there's an end to it, because the ruthlessness that it takes to be great is unsustainable.
That's a great question. The biggest example to me of a guy that I don't think is ruthless, who's as great as just about anybody, would be LeBron. Now, LeBron will do what he's got to do. Nick mentioned yesterday how when LeBron left Miami, it kind of left Dwayne Wade in a lurch and cost him some money. So he will do in Cleveland. When he left Cleveland and went to Miami, he had teammates he was close to that were expecting to know what was going on, and he didn't talk to him and tell him. So LeBron will do what he's got to do for himself to win, but I don't view him as ruthless in the way you do a Kobe Bryant or a Michael Jordan. So I'll throw that out there. Also, you made an interesting point about Brady and the study. Okay, it said that he thrives in a loving and supportive environment. But was that the case in New England? I don't think he had a loving and supportive environment in New England, and he won 6 Super Bowls. So that does make you wonder what in the world was going on with that study, and it seems like it's in contrast to Brady's career, Nick.
Go ahead, Jenna. Go ahead.
Does this surprise you, Nick? Bill Belichick is exactly who he's been for the last 20 years. I can't imagine you read this and you were like, I am shocked that he didn't meet face-to-face. Like, I feel like everyone is who they are. They're all played into their own roles.
The not face-to-face part was somewhat surprising. You're right. It's not a huge departure of character. But, Broussard mentioned LeBron. Listen, LeBron left the Heat in a way, obviously, Pat Riley didn't want, Dwayne Wade didn't want. But Dwayne Wade was on that airplane with him, and LeBron told it. Because they had a personal relationship. They had the conversation. They were together, and then LeBron went off and did his own thing, right? And the relationship was able to sustain that. Betrayal's the wrong word, but LeBron leaving for greener pastures, if you would. There's a big. I understand it's another network, but PTI is celebrating its 20th anniversary. It would be shocking if one of those guys left the other and it was like, hey, Tony, have you talked to Mike? It's like, well, we texted, but I haven't seen him. It's like, wow, how deep was that relationship really? And so I just think that the fact that the not getting face-to-face is a real thing, and to me it's further indicative that Belichick believed I must treat everyone the same. That is part of the system. I must not make exceptions. I must not, if I'm always get out early rather than late, that extends to Brady, and it appears to have become, Jenna, what I think is going to be, without a doubt, the biggest mistake of his professional career.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.